Hi, I'm Jan Ozer. I'm here today with Kate and Juraj from CDN 77. We're here to talk about a subject that's near and dear to all video publishers' hearts, which is cutting CDN costs. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Jen. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
thank you.
So, as a little bit of background for people who are watching, I'm writing an article for Streaming Media. The article is focusing on total cost of ownership. One of the biggest components of costs that video publishers pay every year is the CDN cost. And CDN, not to minimize the importance of CDN, it's absolutely critical to delivering high quality video. If you can't do that, then you don't have customers. So I'm not trying to minimize the role of the CDN in any way, but it is a big expense, and if there's ways to cut it without impacting either QoE or any other quality-related function, it's something all video publishers have to consider. That's kind of the focus of the article. The article looks at things two ways. One is cutting bits, changing your encoding and your packaging patterns, and the second is cutting the CDN cost itself. And CDN 77, as you'll hear in a moment, is a very substantial CDN in Europe, and they walk their customers through this type of analysis very frequently. So that's what we're going to cover. So why don't we start by telling us a little bit about CDN 77? Who do you serve, particularly on the video side?
Okay, let me just start with a very quick intro. So CDN 77 is a global CDN specialized in video. We've been on the market for over 14 years now. We've been founded in 2012. We run a global network with a capacity over 300 Tbps and daily peaks of 85 Tbps. 90% of which is video, both live and VOD. If I should summarize it, we're an engineering company obsessed with a customer service who like to work for our clients and customize. We have originally started in Europe. Over 30% of our total traffic is in Europe, but recently we've expanded heavily in other parts of the world, especially US. Almost 30% of our traffic now is also in US. Around 25% is in APAC, and then in other parts of the world as well, Latin America, Africa, and so forth and so on. So we're pretty global, I would say.
Okay. For anybody who's watching, the outline of this session is going to be cut encoding costs, cut CDN costs. At the end, we're going to go into the multi-CDN, how to control that, how to choose a CDN partner. So I just wanted you to know that's going to be coming up as one of the topics we cover later in the discussion. So why don't we jump into the cutting the bits part? And one of the things we talk about in the article is the concept of per title encoding. And obviously with per title encoding, you can, to a degree, cut the bits that are stored, cut the bits that are delivered. How many of your customers are doing that? And how many of your customers are doing things like CMAF packaging in order to reduce the amount of storage that they use online and during delivery?
Yeah, so let me pick this one up. I would say we see quite a decent number of customers across the whole scale, because obviously we serve customer coming down from what we call the growth plans, like the smaller ones, down up to the quite large ones, enterprise solutions, and mainly on the higher scale of things, we see either per title encoding or some smart bitrate ladders all across the playing field. So I would say most of the customers do at least some type of optimization.
Okay. And when we were talking before, you talked about AI poking its head into this. What are you saying in terms of AI implementations for
Yeah, so this comes down to the specific customers, because obviously every customer has different use cases and different implementations and viewers on different devices, etc. But what we currently see is we see a prevalence of AI-driven tools, either for CFR or similar approaches that are built on open source standards and are then tightly fitted into the whole ecosystem that the client use.
Okay. What about .264 versus HEVC or AV1? How much advanced codecs are you seeing used by your customers?
I would say this is really heavily specific on the use cases, because obviously when it comes to, for example, mobile devices, you want to stick to the most to the format that is most supported on most devices, and obviously you have mobile networks in play, etc. And when it comes to the standard OTT platforms, then we mostly see implementations of AV1 and these new cutting edge technologies, support for higher bit rates, etc. So really comes out to the use case.
Okay, so what if you were going to divide your total video traffic into layers, H.264, HEVC, AV1, what percentage would you assign to those codecs? And these are rough numbers. And if you don't
Yeah,
know, just
I would still say 80% is 264, and then the split for the other formats.
okay. And what
Because
about Go ahead.
yeah, so just to rewind, usually what we see, we still see support for 264, and then we also see our clients implementing the support for the new codecs, but they want to still keep the sort of the old stuff to support all the older devices.
Okay, makes understood. What about CMAF?
Yeah, I would say for all new standardized applications, CMAF is quite prevalent currently. It comes down to different optimization. Obviously, having one data source for both HLS and Dash is obviously the way to go forward currently.
Does that save 50%? I mean, what's the practical effect of using CMAF on your CDN build? Does it cut it in half, or is it less than that because you still have to support some older devices with, standard HLS? How does that work?
Specifically, I would say half to half. Now, this again comes down to what the client uses. Most of the major clients have their own pipelines to work and process videos. When it comes to those that use our encoders, we still see them also keeping at least Dash for the legacy devices, as we call them. Now, when it comes to the sort of really heavily customized pipelines, we see even more obscure formats, but I would say half of the traffic is coming down to CMAF currently.
Okay. And that's going to be much more efficient from a cache perspective because obviously, as you said, it's HLS and Dash pulling the same data. Okay, so that's the bits that companies are creating both through encoding and through packaging. It seems like the most efficient, once you have the bits, you got to deliver them. It seems like the most efficient way you can do that is to improve caching efficiency. So let's kind of, or is that accurate? I mean, is that if I was looking at my CDN costs and we've already got the encode side covered, is caching where you would start?
Yeah, Kate, do you want to start with this one, and I'll pick up on the points?
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps just to give a bit more general idea on CDN costs, and then we can narrow it down to cache efficiency. Regarding any cost cutting, so what we see is that more often than not, companies go straight for squeezing the per gig rate, which can make sense. But it's always worth running the full cost analysis of the entire workflow first, not just the CDN line item. So start with the origin and processing data. What do you actually spend to prepare and serve the content before it even hits the CDN layer? Because what we see very often is that clients spend much more money on storing, processing, and getting the data to the CDN than the CDN traffic itself. So this is where we usually see even more room for saving than just squeezing the per gig rate. And specifically speaking, egress cost is often a biggest source of the hidden cost. So essentially the traffic between the CDN and origin. So the question we're asking is how can we actually eliminate the egress traffic in the first place? Could some of these operations, for instance, be moved to the edge? And then there's obviously cache efficiency in play, which moves the needle most for the VOD-heavy platforms. Because every cache hit means that the content is served from the cache, but every cache miss means a trip back to the origin, which as I mentioned, is very often costs more than the CDN traffic itself. So then, practically speaking, getting your cache hit ratio from, let's say, 92% up to 97% could often mean a bigger cost saving than you would otherwise negotiate on the per gig price. So yeah, and then comes things like device-specific manifests, kept CRF, and smarter ABR ladders. And only once you've walked through all of that, you get to commercial levers, committed contracts, multi-CDN leverage, and renegotiation. So just this is how I would summarize cost savings in a big picture. But definitely, caching is something that makes the CDN economic works, for sure. Yes.
What's the magic number? You talked about 92 versus 97 for cache hit ratio. Is that, I mean, that sounds very efficient. Is that achievable? I mean, is that a common number?
Absolutely. It's just always it's client and use case specific. There is a different number that applies for live and different number that applies for VOD, because for VOD and you address different challenges. For VOD, you have huge libraries, and the content is growing exponentially, while the life cycle of the content also changes dramatically, while the demand for the cache hit ratio remains intact. So you need to adjust your strategies to that. Usually what, and again, I don't want to say that 95, 97 is the exact number everybody should aim for. There is no universal formula for that, but usually what we see for VOD heavy platforms is that we are aiming for, let's say, 97 to 98%. And there are different strategies how to achieve this. One of them being, for instance, multi-layer CDN architecture. So that essentially means that there are this a hierarchical network of servers. You have so essentially more layers between edge servers closest to the end users and origin. And the point is, the main idea is that the most popular and, let's say, the hot content is stored or cached closest to the end users. So essentially on the edge servers, which are in multiple locations. In terms of CDN 7.7, we have over 200 locations. So all the servers around these locations. And then if the content is not stored, not cached, at these servers, you can fetch it basically anywhere from the entire infrastructure rather than from the origin. So then you have all these mid tiers in fewer and, let's say, bigger locations, all down to the origin shield, which is a single location, typically a single location in front of the origin server. So in ideal use case, if you have, let's say, a new series being published, instead of fetching all the 200 edge locations, fetching it from the origin, ideally you get it, you fetch it only once from the origin shield. So this is the multi-layer caching infrastructure, and then you have other strategies to how to for other cache optimizations, such as admission and eviction algorithms, because you need to make sure that only that content that is likely to be requested repeatedly is cached on the server. So you need to basically optimize the cache space on that single server. Then there is consistent hashing, because you want to make sure that only the unique content is cached. And then there is, for instance, Bloom filters, which in very short terms means that the servers talk to each other and know what is cached on each layer and server. So there are different strategies and dozens of optimizations. So these are just a few to name, few cache optimizations that we use.
Okay. So what are the top X things that streamers can do to improve caching? You talked about a few of them, but just kind of give us a summary.
Okay, so what I've described are the cache optimizations on the CDN level, and that's in a general terms, but very often we customize it based on the client setup. So we really work with all clients individually based on their setup. So it really is use case and client specific, I would say.
Okay. Um, okay. So once a streamer has done everything they can to improve caching, um, they kind of have to look to either another CDN or getting the cost down on their current CDN. What do you look for in pricing if I'm thinking about switching to a different CDN? What am I looking for?
Um, so a couple of checkboxes to make. Definitely transparency and simplicity in pricing. I want to have a bigger picture of what I'm actually going to pay, not a 13 pages script on the pricing. And I just want to really understand in the very beginning what is the big picture of my cost. Because some CDNs providers are, for instance, still charging for requests, which is something we don't do, but they clients very often realize it is at the very end because it's not very transparently stated. So I would say transparency and simplicity. Important question is if I migrate to a different provider, does it create a cost for me elsewhere? What is their caching strategy or how cache efficient they can be? Is my egress cost going to stay the same or is it going to go down or is it going to increase? So this is also an important question. And also, I would definitely say that the financial stability of the CDN provider that I'm going to migrate to, because we've seen 4 CDNs exiting the market and pricing of CDN going up. So I want the predictability. I want to make sure that the CDN is going to be here in 5 years, because migrating to another CDN is not a simple replacement, is not a change in DNS. It's rather a major engineering effort. So I would say long-term efficiency is definitely something that I'm looking for. And also, are they going to handle my use case entirely? Is it going to be a full switch, or am I so vendor locked in that I need to keep part of the services at the other provider? So it's all these questions is something that needs to be taken into account.
Estimate cost when you don't know your cache hit ratio. That seems to play like a really important factor in what your cost is actually going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, do you just estimate, say, okay, it's going to be somewhere between 92 and 95 or 92 and 97, or is it going to vary a lot between the different CDNs?
You mean the cache hit ratio or
the cache hit rate? I mean, because if I'm at 90, as you talked about at the start, cache hit ratio between 92 and 95 is going to impact your cost more than. So how do I even estimate cost without knowing the cache hit ratio, which is going to vary by provider?
I mean, usually what you do is that you look at your, or when a client comes to us for the first place and we start onboarding process, we look at the numbers, cache hit ratio that he has with his current or with his existing provider. And that tells us a lot. But very important, and it's actually a very, very good point as well, I didn't mention before, is the testing itself, because very often always basically we ask for a sample of traffic, and we want to see the traffic structure and exactly how cache efficient we can be. So this is something that we do before even we can't give someone a price tag unless we know the traffic structure and the cache efficiency. So testing and seeing the sample is absolutely crucial.
The CDNs handle ABR with different skill levels or with different proficiency, or is it just like any other file? I mean, video CDNs kind of tout their ability to handle ABR, packaging, the segment files. Is that magic, or is there good providers and bad providers, or is that just bits that you deliver?
Yeah. So when it comes down to ABR, because obviously ABR is more of a processing thing on the side of the origin, straightly talking from the sense of a CDN, there's a matter of no difference for us if the chunk is this quality and this high of a bitrate or different. But obviously we have video in mind when we build the whole CDN stack, because obviously you have different implementations of video, and let's say you have VOD and live streaming, those would be the two largest use cases. And for specifically there, we approach it differently even on the hardware level, because for example with VOD you usually have large archives, and the latency is not so crucial there. So you tend to have a large cache space. And then when it comes to live streams, what we usually do, we cache live stream and chunks of live streams to the RAM instead of to hard drives or SSDs currently. And that is because usually the viewers of live content usually just watches something that we call the live edge, those few chunks that everybody is watching. And what you want to do is you want to fetch those as fast to the cache as possible and then send it out to the world. And obviously we have request coalescings and stuff like that. So even from the nature of the CDN itself and from the hardware stack, we look differently at different use cases, and we have different applications there. So it really varies.
Okay. One of the questions that came up when I was researching was the whole cost structure for long-term storage. So if I'm a VOD publisher and I've got libraries and I've got an asset that is accessed very infrequently, do I store that in a different tier, or will that extend the time to first frame so long that you always want to use something that's pretty current?
Yeah, and even here on the origin side, and just speaking in terms of object storage specifically, you have so many different providers and so many different offerings. Infrequent sort of access storage, as AWS or other providers call it, is one of the approaches that definitely can help you save quite a lot of bucks. For example, what we do, we have two tiers of storages. One is sort of standard wise that is optimized for video. We use HDD drives there, and then we have sort of either frequent access or small file optimized storages which are built on SSDs. And so even coming out to the origin, it really depends on what's the file formats and what's the structure and what's the use case again for choosing the best solution for you that will not limit you in any way, because of this limiting any factor within the pipeline that is limiting will then have effect on your QBR, and then obviously the cost coming down to that. So comes down to the use case again.
Okay, so I guess to kind of summarize, is there a substantial enough difference in costs of storage that it makes sense to look at longer term storage for assets that aren't played that frequently? And if so, what's the penalty in terms of time to first frame?
If your archive is large enough, it would make a difference. So it really comes down to the size of the archive, because obviously when you have few terabytes of storage, it doesn't make as much of a sense. But with really large archives, and we see it now because streaming platforms has a huge amounts of content attached to them, it definitely makes sense, and to look for optimizations on the origin side.
Okay. What about, and I guess the question is, what about the location of the points of presence vis-a-vis the target audience? I mean, how important? I guess that's important to QoE, but not caching, or caching and QoE, or what's your sense of that?
Actually both. Actually both. I would say, and it's not prevalent as now, but formerly we see a lot of CDNs, speaking a bit of a crazy numbers in terms of how many locations they have, and they have 700 and more locations. The thing here with the amount of POPs, as we call them, and locations, it is a sort of a tug of war, because obviously you want to have as much locations as possible, because you want to be in every corner of the world and as close as to the end users. But coming down to how many locations in the last layer you have, we call them edge locations. You then mill down the number of requests coming to the specific edge server, which then means that the edge server would probably need to fetch the content from either origin shield or even origin in the end. So having actually a substantially huge amount of pops in the end, if your traffic is super global and you don't have extensive amount of requests per each pop, can actually hurt your cache hit ratio. So even what we see with some clients, we have I would say, a substantial offering, a number of locations we are in. But even for specific regions, we sometimes disable POPs because it actually helps the hit rate in the specific region for that one location, for that one state or country, etc. So it really comes down to the nature of the traffic and to the structure there.
Okay, that's interesting.
I would perhaps make a very quick bridge here because previously, Jen, we talked about multi-CDN strategies and multi-CDNs benefits in general. And here what we see is that when our clients have multiple CDNs in stack, having actually all these CDNs provide them with coverage and basically they have an access to all interconnections and all locations in that pool from all providers. So then when you have a global traffic, you often realize that there is not a single CDN that has an ideal combination of price and the performance everywhere. So yeah, basically that's where having multiple CDNs in stack become very efficient because you get the best out of each vendor in stack. And we have seen actually many clients reaching out to us with a demand for delivery in what we call hard to reach markets, such as Africa, Middle East, or Latin America, where we've deployed a lot of so-called embedded caches. So basically, essentially caches embedded directly in the ISPs networks. And where we often can offer even better business conditions thanks to the local deployment. So while delivering excellent performance compared to some vendors. So yeah.
Okay, let's look at the multi-CDN. I mean, one of the ways to get a good price with the CDN, as you guys know better than I, is to make a commitment for traffic. It makes sense for me to, if I'm a publisher and when does it make sense for me to look to a multi-CDN, given that I'm going to have to continue to meet the thresholds to get my price with the single CDN that I'm already hooked up with?
Yeah, you mentioned one of the drawbacks of multi-CDN stack, and that's basically that from a business perspective, if you split your traffic volume between multiple CDNs, you lose some of the leverage on the volume-based discounts. But at the same time, commercially speaking, it naturally creates a very competitive, very direct competitive situation. So there is an advantage of that as well. And then there is reliability. So to what's come on my mind, resilient in redundancy. So from the risk management perspective, it definitely makes sense. And as I mentioned before, coverage, you get the pool of locations and interconnections of all CDNs in a stack. And so, yeah, many of our clients actually do that they combine the QoE and the price into the evaluation criteria and compare CDNs in their stack based on that. But yeah, and I would say that for large volume clients, it comes naturally having multi-CDNs in stack. The question is not whether to have a multi-CDN stack, but how many CDN vendors actually have to have in their stack, and what's the best way to manage the stack. So I would say that for mid-size and large clients, it's not really a question whether or not, but how many and how to manage the stack. But again, coming back to the drawbacks, I think it's important to mention that while all this sounds very attractive, you need to multiply your workflows, not only from the commercial perspective, because you need to negotiate price, but also from the technical implementation. And things get even more complicated if you deploy a process at the edge using edge computing. So that's where the lack of standardization can further complicate things. We have actually seen clients found a way around this by deploying one primary CDN that serves as both as an origin shield, which reduces the egress cost, and as the edge platform, while the remaining CDNs serve purely as delivery proxies. So clients can get pretty creative in this way.
Okay, what are the control options? I mean, based on my research is that there's companies that manage multi-CDNs for you. There's services, Conviva and NPA have them. There's do-it-yourself. I mean, so if I'm a small company and I'm looking for multi-CDN, how do I want to control it, at least initially?
Yeah. There are a number of approaches to this. For the mechanism itself, we see both third-party services that handle the multi-CDN management based on configurable rules, as well as in-house allocation setups. So clients really approach this very individually. Some of them split their traffic equally between all CDNs in stack using a round-robin approach. So that means every third, fourth, fifth request going to a specific CDN in the rotation. But what we see more often is that that clients actually allocate traffic based on a combination of performance and price. And as I mentioned before, this way you get really the best of each vendor in the stack, because you control volume shares and geographical distribution on country or ISP level based on an actual QoE data. And this is typically a part of a regular evaluation process, which happens monthly or quarterly. But what we've seen recently is also that some clients are able to move traffic nearly real time based on the actual performance. So if you feed CMCD data, CDN real-time logs, and player data into your system, you can get a pretty good log-based visibility on what's actually happening on the CDN level, on the performance level. And this lets you make quick decisions and control your QoE through close to real-time actions.
Again, I guess my question is more, how do I do that? Is that software I license? Is that a service I license? Is it something I develop myself? Any of the above, all of the above? So I'm a small company. I don't have a lot of engineering resources. I want to implement multi-CDN. Do I go to a Convivo and an MPA, or do I go to a multi-CDN service, or what do I do?
I would say like both approaches work. As I said, you can either go to third-party services or have an in-house allocation setups.
Okay. What about the disparate logs, and the whole structure of how a CDN reports is going to vary from CDN to CDN? How complicated is it to kind of integrate those reports and kind of analyze them together?
Yeah, let me pick this one up. So this is specifically, and it comes down to different features, because obviously not a single provider use standardized stuff for any of those features, or for example for logging. So what we usually see is because we have our own implementation of real-time logging that is then streamed to either log processing pipelines the clients have, or object storages they have, etc. What they usually then do is they feed it into their own log processing pipeline when they match the log format and they move forward. Or we also had clients that specifically asked us to match the logging formats they use, and in specific enterprise implementations, we are obviously happy to do so if it then allows the client to focus on other parts of the whole implementation process and ease the whole process off. And this comes out to like straight across all the features. For example, a single features such as signed URLs, different CDN, basically any CDN use different format for it and different formatting. And for example, for times when different CDN exited the market quite at the same time, we see a push of new clients, and most of these had platforms already built their specific URL formats in mind, and obviously changing the whole URL structure was quite a challenging task for some of these clients. So what we even did is we implemented different formats of different competitor of CDN providers into our platform just to ease the switch or to introduction of new CDN for our new upcoming clients. So yeah. It can be an endeavor, and this comes down to my and Kate's team. Is we try to leverage and help the clients as much as possible through customizations on our side to ease of the work and make the sailing smooth.
Okay. I mean, Kate, you talked about multi-CDN being natural for most of your large customers. Is that, I guess you talked about redundancy, you talked about price, you talked about QoE. What's the motivation there? Is it all three, or what's your sense of why companies are choosing to go multi-CDN? What's the big motivation?
I would say it's a combination of everything, of all the factors, of all the aspects we've mentioned here, and plus it's the current situation on the market. We've discussed this already, but we've seen clients coming to us saying that it's basically part of their risk management strategy, because what's going on in the market with CDNs exiting the market, raising the prices. So they don't want to rely on a single CDN.
Okay. And is this, not to give you a softball question, but is this, if I go to CDN 77 and say, you know, I want to use my CDN, I want to integrate different CDNs, is that a service provide or CDNs would provide? You know, would you provide the integration layer for your customers to make that easier for them to do? Is that a service that typically CDNs will provide for their customers?
Yeah, I would pick this one up. So we tend to help them with specific bits of the whole implementation process. Obviously, where we see something that we can easily tweak in the Nginx configuration on our side, for example, that are the parts that we are usually happy to help with, because it's sometimes an easy change on our end can actually save weeks of, or either days or weeks of development time on the client side. But obviously coming down to the whole platform and for the whole integration platform, that's usually handled by the client. But whenever we see, and this comes down to whenever we see a space to help the client, we do it. And this comes down to the way how we treat the clients is usually we use shared Slack channels where we discuss the whole process and we are on top of the whole process. And we know what challenges the new and upcoming customers or even existing ones face, and we help them actively in real time.
Okay. And if I'm a small publisher currently with a single CDN, if I come to you and say I want to do this to cut my costs, are you going to laugh at me and say you're not going to cut costs? Or, you know, what's your sense? What's the motivation for a small publisher to go from a single to multiple? Is it the same as Kate repeated a couple times, or is there a cost? Go ahead.
It is. It is a combination of things always. We would never laugh at any upcoming client that's coming towards us and need something to help with. I would say it's a combination of things. Obviously, the price-wise, if traffic allows you, it's always a good thing to have multiple CDNs. But also, what we see is you have local disruptions across networks, and then some CDNs are affected, some are not. So even from the resilient and sort of standpoint, it really makes sense. And when there's not a huge engineering effort behind it, I would say to at least look into the idea of introducing new CDNs to your stack and mix matching different, let's say, different regions. Or it really comes down to what's the use case and what plays for you the best. But this is where our specific teams come into play, because we are always happy to discuss with either our client or someone who are looking to be clients or other CDN and allow to help them to understand what is best for the use case, because over the years I tend to say that we have some insight into it.
Yeah, certainly. You spent 35 minutes talking about it, so yeah, I'd agree you have some insight into it.
I would just say that you really need to check your boxes and see what works for you, because sometimes if you're a smaller publisher, it may not make sense for you because you, as I mentioned, you lose these volume-based discounts, and then you get higher per gig price just because you're onboarding more CDNs. So yeah, it's really individual, and that's how we even consult our clients on an individual basis based on the traffic volume, based on geographical distribution, traffic patterns, usage, and so forth and so on.
Okay. Well, listen, that's all I have. You guys have been great. I appreciate you taking the time to prepare for this and to do such a cohesive and valuable presentation.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your questions.
Thanks a lot, Jen. Great questions, and hopefully
it was nice.
Useful.
Okay. Talk to you guys soon. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Totally. Thank you. Have a nice one.
You too.